It's Monday, and Jia is being introduced to the staff of Second Cafe. Yenju mentions that she and Jia went to college together before introducing the rest of the staff. First, she introduces Chuli, one of their top baristas, and tells Jia that if she ever has questions, he's the one to ask. Then, Yenju introduces Nariju, Nari. But Jia and Nari are shocked to recognize each other from a past encounter at the gym, where Nari had been trying to seduce Menchiel. Nari recently turned 25, and most people see her as narcissistic. She often boasts about her great style and good looks. She even wears earbuds without music so she can hear people compliment her appearance, and takes a route 10 minutes longer just to show off to passers-by. Nari also works at Second Cafe, which, on the surface, seems like a typical cafe, but in reality offers unmatched benefits. Since the previous manager left, Nari had been next in line for the role. If she became the manager, she'd feel like she finally had everything she ever wanted. But now, with Jia's arrival as the new manager, Nari's dream has been shattered. Furious, Nari complains to Yenju, arguing that she has been with the cafe longer and contributed more than Jia. She demands an explanation, especially since Jia doesn't have much experience in the industry. Yenju, unfazed, simply reminds Nari that she owns the cafe and can do whatever she wants, essentially telling Nari it's a skill issue. Nari is outraged, questioning how Jia can have a hot husband and be friends with a famous author. Before the tension escalates, Nari awkwardly apologizes to Jia for what happened at the gym. Jia brushes it off, saying it's in the past and doesn't matter anymore. Nari is taken aback by Jia's calm response and thinks it's kind of cool that Jia didn't get mad. Still, Nari believes Jia doesn't know the first thing about running a cafe and can't accept her as the manager. When Jia asks Nari for help, it catches her off guard, and her voice cracks as she awkwardly agrees. Jia asks about a recipe, and Nari quickly realizes she doesn't actually have to help. She decides to taunt Jia, saying it's embarrassing that a manager doesn't know something so basic, but Jia calmly replies that's exactly why she's asking, to learn and improve. Nari is shocked that Jia doesn't get flustered. Despite Nari's rude attitude, Jia keeps asking questions. Nari, to her surprise, starts noticing that Jia isn't bad-looking. Embarrassed, Nari tells Jia to ask Siuli for help and walks away, discreetly flipping her off in frustration. She thinks Jia is annoying. Soon after, an old man arrives and compliments Nari's appearance, which irritates her. He asks for her number, and when Nari tries to give him the store number instead, he gets angry, claiming that after spending so much money at the cafe, the least she could do is give him her personal number. Nari wishes Chuli or the boss were around to deal with this. Suddenly, Jia appears next to Nari and, to Nari's shock, suggests that Nari should give the man her number because the customer is always right. The man gets excited, feeling understood for the first time. Jia then introduces herself as the new manager. Nari is at a loss, unable to believe what Jia's doing. To her surprise, Jia writes something down on a piece of paper and hands it to the man, saying it's the number he wanted. When the man leaves, Nari realizes Jia gave him the store's number all along, but handled the situation confidently. The man is excited because all he wants is to take Nari for a drive and grab something to eat together. But when he looks at the number on the paper, his excitement turns to outrage. It's 911, the emergency number. The man is furious, but Jia, completely calm, insists that he go ahead and dial it. The entire cafe is now staring at them. To make things worse, Jia offers to dial it for him, which only infuriates the man more. The man pulls the classic, "Do you know who I am?" card, but Jia effortlessly flips the situation by replying, "Do you know who I am?" The man, suddenly subdued, quietly admits that he doesn't know her, and awkwardly wishes them a good day before leaving. As soon as he's gone, Jia sighs and comments that she almost let her true colours show back there. Nari, somewhat impressed, thanks Jia for her help and expresses concern that the situation might cause trouble with the boss or stir up rumours. But Jia, nonchalant, brushes it off, saying she'll deal with it when it happens and that there's no point worrying about something that hasn't even occurred yet. Even if it does, she promises to take full responsibility. Nari jokingly replies that as long as Jia takes full responsibility, it's fine. She's surprised. She never thought Gia was the type to step up like that, and she has to admit that Gia standing up for her was pretty awesome. But then, Nari quickly reminds herself that Gia is still her enemy. After all, Gia stole Menchiel and her chance at becoming manager, even though deep down, Nari knows Gia never really stole Menchiel in the first place. Suddenly, another customer enters the cafe and asks for one hot-iced Americano. Both Gia and Nari are speechless. It's villain number 2, the notorious hot ice lady. This lady has a reputation for chewing out the staff if they get her order wrong. She continues, saying she didn't expect the same qualità in Servidio as a cafe in Milan, but their lack of response is rude. Gia, looking frustrated but composed, repeats the order in the lady's strange accent. Then, without hesitation, Gia hands her a cup of ice and a hot Americano, letting the lady decide how much ice she wants. Surprisingly, the lady says Gia passes and leaves. Nari is shocked. That's all it took to satisfy her? Nari starts to notice that Gia does whatever she wants and seems to have fun doing it. Gia continues to handle things in her unique way, even confronting loud customers. When they complain, Gia dramatically tells them they're disturbing the peace and that legal action will be taken. She calls the boss, who refunds their money and orders them to leave, stating that lawyers will follow up with a lawsuit. Afterward, Gia asks for salt to cleanse the cafe. Observing Gia's quirky behavior, Nari realizes that Gia has a way of making everyone happy, which explains why people are drawn to her. As Nari watches, she notices Chuli staring at Gia. Alarmed, Nari quickly covers his eyes, determined not to let Gia take him away from her. Meanwhile, in a black car, Yanduk asks the hot ice lady how Gia did. The lady, slightly disappointed, says that Gia seems unsatisfied with working in a cafe. She then turns to Yanduk, asking why he's introducing Gia to her now. The lady is Yomana, the CEO of Yomi Entertainment. The cafe is now closed, and Gia is saying goodbye to Nari and Chuli. A lot happened today, but nothing too major. However, there's one last thing Gia needs to deal with. She suddenly calls out to a man with a box on his head, telling him to come out because she saw him hiding for a while. Minchi is shocked that Gia spotted him, thinking his perfect disguise of casual clothing and a box was foolproof. As they walk home together, Minchiel is still confused about how Gia recognized him, especially since he wore different clothes and had a box on his head. Gia acknowledges that he put in some effort and asks why he was at the cafe, since he doesn't drink coffee and the cafe is out of his way. Minchiel fumbles for an excuse and eventually says he's trying out a new workout routine, walking to the gym instead of running on the treadmill. Gia, amused, remarks that she thought he was there to pick her up and smirks at him. As they continue walking, Gia suddenly trips, but instead of hitting the ground, she finds herself in her bed, her face buried in a pillow. The conversation had been going well until she tripped and fell, and she swears she heard a crack from Minchiel's shoulder when he caught her. She remembers how he looked in pain at the gym and starts worrying that something might be wrong. Concerned, Gia goes to check on Minchiel. When she opens his door, she's greeted by the sight of him shirtless, and she quickly becomes flustered, backing away and awkwardly saying she's going for a walk. Minchiel, confused, watches as Gia then sits down in his gaming chair. Minchiel explains that he pulled his shoulder and back muscles when he caught her, and he was just about to apply some pain relief patches. Gia, still confused, asks how he's going to put them on if he can barely reach behind himself. Minchiel confidently insists he has a method. First, he lays the patches on the floor, then he rolls around on them until they stick to his body. Once he stands up, they should be properly applied. Gia can't help but laugh, thinking his approach is as quirky as ever. Bah, the patches aren't sticking properly. Gia sighs and offers to put them on Minchiel's back for him. Despite his insistence that he can handle it himself, Gia is already prepping another patch, telling him to be quiet. As she carefully inspects Minchiel's back, she realizes that not much has changed since they were kids, when they would always scratch each other's backs or apply ointment when it was out of reach. The only difference now is that Minchiel's back is much wider. Gia starts wondering what Minchiel eats to get such a broad back. As she thinks about it, She remembers she was on his back during their honeymoon, which makes her start to unconsciously touch his back. Minchki suddenly speaks up, calling out to Jia. Startled, she quickly stops and he asks why she's rubbing his back. Embarrassed, Jia struggles to explain and ends up blurting out that his back is incredibly attractive. Trying to save herself, she quickly adds, "Your shoulders are huge," and starts massaging them. Minchil, now concerned, asks if she's okay, but Jia insists his shoulders feel like rocks. As she continues massaging his back, Jia can't help but feel that this situation could easily spiral into something awkward. Minchil, without his glasses, glances at her and comments that her nails are digging into his back, causing him some pain. Flustered, Jia apologizes, realizing he isn't wearing his glasses, and tries to focus on giving a proper massage. She mentally scolds herself, acknowledging that she needs to get her mind out of the gutter. After all, it's just a massage. 10 minutes later, Jia's hands are aching from the effort. Minchi's back is massive, and she wonders if stepping on his back like she used to do for her dad might have been more effective. Regardless, Minchia thanks Jia for the massage, mentioning that he feels much better and can move freely now. Jia is happy that Minchia is feeling good and starts to head back to her room to sleep. However, Minchia stops her, insisting on returning the favor with a shoulder massage. Jia tries to decline, claiming she doesn't have any knots, but Minchia doesn't let it go. Now sitting on the bed, Jia watches nervously as Minchiel prepares to give her a shoulder massage. He asks her to move her hair to the front, and when she does, he gently places his hands on her shoulders. Jia feels inexplicably nervous. Why am I so anxious, she wonders. It's clear Minchiel isn't feeling the same way. He's calm and focused. As his hands begin to knead her shoulders, Jia lets out a small sound which makes Minchiel pause, thinking she must be in pain. But the pain isn't in her shoulders. It's in her heart. Jia's heart is pounding so fast and loud that she's convinced Minchil can hear it. Even if he can't hear it, surely he can feel the vibrations through her body. But Minchil doesn't say anything. Is he pretending not to notice? She wonders. The massage continues until suddenly, Jia yelps in pain. Minchil's pressure is too much. It feels like her shoulders are going to rip off. Instinctively, Jia grabs Minchil's arm, digging her nails into his skin. In the commotion, Jia falls back onto the bed, and when she opens her eyes, Minchil is leaning over her, his glasses off. Jia's face flushes with embarrassment, and the angle they're in feels problematic. She grips the bedsheets tightly, bracing herself for whatever happens next. Wait, what underwear did I wear today? She panics, unable to remember. Then it hits her. She wore a matching set earlier to feel more confident at work. Flustered, Jia tries to shake off the moment, but her heart continues to race, and she wonders if Minchil feels the same tension in the air. Jia feels relieved for a moment, but then quickly becomes embarrassed. Why am I relieved my underwear isn't mismatched, she wonders. It's almost as if she's anticipating something more with Minchil, and that thought makes her flustered. Jia puckers her lips, waiting for Minchil to kiss her, but he just stays there, unmoving. After a long 10 seconds, she pushes him off, annoyed. Why didn't he make a move? Nothing seems to be going right for Jia today. She even messed up while trying to open a snack earlier. It wasn't a total failure, but right now, all she can think about is how sure she was that Minchil would kiss her. Maybe I was the only one expecting it. Jia blushes, feeling foolish for assuming. Both of them are unsure of what to do next. Minchil suddenly gets up and calls out to Jia, catching her attention. She asks, "What's up?" And he hesitates before saying, "It's not good for your back to crouch like that. You should push your chest out to keep your posture straight." Jia straightens her back, and Minchil gives her a thumbs up before heading to take a shower, despite just putting on the pain patches. Now alone, Jia lies down on the sofa, disappointed that Minchil didn't kiss her. She berates herself for falling into these kinds of expectations over and over again. Meanwhile, Minchil in the bathroom is just as frustrated. He slams his fist against the walls, looking completely drained. His gaze falls on a pink toothbrush, presumably Jia's, and he picks it up, lost in thought. Back in the living room, Jia looks at a picture from their honeymoon and reflects on how she and Minchia are often called a trickster couple, always surprising each other in unexpected ways. Suddenly, Minchia appears, startling her. He casually says, "I brushed my teeth," leaving Jia confused as to why that's relevant. Minchia then explains, "I had cucumbers with dinner, and I know you don't like the taste of cucumbers. That's why I didn't kiss you." Jia stares at him, processing the explanation, and can't help but feel a mixture of relief and exasperation. Mitchell asks if he can kiss Jia now, and when she says yes, he leans in and kisses her. After the first kiss, he takes off his glasses and continues, much to Jia's slight annoyance. She thinks he's always so strict about following the rules, maybe he should be a bit more flexible. Just as that thought crosses her mind, Mitchell surprises her by placing his hand on her waist. Jia is momentarily shocked by the sudden boldness. At Jian Construction, Miss Emotion tells Miss Reason that Menial Construction is on strike again, which frustrates Miss Reason because there's a lot of work to be done. Suddenly, a giant machine appears, driven by Mr. Flexibility from Menial Construction. He cheerfully tells them to just keep working while using his machine to move dirt, leaving Miss Emotion and Miss Reason in awe of his solution. Back in reality, Jia is surprised by Mitchell's newfound flexibility. It's unexpected, and she's not sure how to react. She thinks that Mitchell needs to turn on the blinker before making such a move, but then acknowledges he did, just in his own way. Jia is impressed, but then reminds herself that Mitchell is still a guy, so maybe it was bound to happen. Still, she hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly today. Mitchell's hand slides up Jia's shirt slightly, inching closer to something more intimate. But just before things go further, a phone buzzes, breaking the moment. Both Jia and Mitchell freeze, unsure of what to do. Mitchell leans in for another kiss, but Jia stops him and tells him to answer the phone. Mitchell hesitates, but finally gets up to take the call, leaving Jia feeling flustered and embarrassed. Now alone, Jia tries to sleep but is consumed with thoughts. She questions why she told Mitchell to answer the phone. If she were drunk, she wouldn't have hesitated to go further, but she was sober, and that stopped her. She recalls the kisses, feeling embarrassed all over again, and begins punching her pillow in frustration. Have I come to like Mitchell this much? She wonders, uncertain of when her feelings started to change. Just as Jia begins to ponder the nature of their relationship, she's interrupted by a knock on the door. It's Mitchell, asking if he can come in. Jia is confused but lets Mitchell in. He's on his knees, looking nervous, which only adds to Jia's confusion. For a moment she wonders if he wants to continue what was interrupted earlier, but instead Mitchell awkwardly blurts out that his mum is coming over this weekend and asks if that's okay. Jia is completely taken aback. She tries to dodge the question by asking if he meant her mum, but Mitchell confirms that his own mother will be in town for business. Neither of them knows why she's visiting, and the atmosphere turns uncomfortable. Jia feels her anxiety rise. She's still awkward around Minchiel's mother. Memories of their school days flash in her mind. The bell rings at school and students rush out of the classrooms. It's the stormy period of puberty, when everything feels heightened, especially in middle school. Everyone wants to stand out, and even the lunch menu feels like torture. Jia and her friend are trying to climb the school wall to escape, protesting that the food they're served is worse than what prisoners of war get, and therefore a violation of the Geneva Convention. Her friend is worried they'll get caught, but Jia insists it's worth the risk. Then, just as they're halfway up the wall, a woman wielding a baguette catches them. The woman had already subdued another student trying to escape, and now she orders Jia and her friend down. The punishment is swift and severe. She smacks Jia and her friend's behinds with the baguette so hard they can barely stand. It's not violence, it's corporal punishment, as the woman in charge of discipline at Jia's school was none other than Minchiel's mother. Jia had thought back then that she might get off easier since it was Mitchell's mum, but she was wrong. In fact, she got punished even harder. Jia sighs, remembering how she had definitely deserved it back then, but now that same woman is her mother-in-law. The thought makes her uneasy. She tries to shake it off by watching baseball, commenting to herself about how it reminds her of the old days when things were simpler. Before she ever imagined she'd be dealing with Mitchell's mum again, but in such a different context. Mitchell is confused, not knowing that Gia used to play baseball. She confirms with a smirk that her position was always the ball and Mitchell's mother was the batter. Suddenly, Mitchell's mum, whose name is Jizzy Jang, arrives and they get into the car. As they drive, Gia notices how healthy Mitchell's mother looks and wonders what she eats to stay so fit. Jizzy comments that she's happy Mitchell actually picked her up this time, even though she's always declined whenever he offers. Then, she asks if the idea to pick her up was Gia's, and Gia freezes for a second before realizing that yes, she is the daughter-in-law. Dia confirms, but she's unsure how to address Mitchell's mum, feeling the awkwardness of the situation. She texts Mitchell for help, but naturally he ignores her text, so Gia awkwardly turns to him and asks if he could look at his phone. Meanwhile, Jizzy raises an eyebrow and comments that she finds it strange how they still call each other by their names. Both Gia and Mitchell are suddenly terrified of what she might mean, and Gia nervously asks her to explain. Jizzy casually starts talking out loud, saying that ever since they discussed getting married, she's sensed some sort of incompatibility between them. Gia feels the tension rising. This could be a dangerous situation for both her and Mitchell. Jizzy goes on to say that they've seemed a bit awkward for a couple about to get married, and she's always been quick to pick up on little things. Especially when it comes to, she expresses her suspicion about how quickly they decided to marry, just an hour after Mitchell signed up for the dating service. However, Jizzy softens, admitting she might be reading too much into things, but points out that newlywed couples typically can't keep their hands off each other. And the fact that Gia and Mitchell don't even call each other by pet names is unusual. Gia, feeling the pressure, quickly tries to diffuse the situation. She claims that they only occasionally call each other by their names and then nervously adds, "Hey." Mitchell's mum stares at her for a moment, then waits for more, leaving the air thick with unspoken questions. Mitchell's mother looks confused when she hears Gia call him "hey" and quickly looks away in embarrassment. Before Jizzy can say anything else, Gia blurts out, "Babe," and urgently tells Mitchell to check his texts. She's mortified for calling him babe in front of his mum. Jizzy, with a knowing look, concludes that they probably call each other babe, and Mitchell, trying to lighten the situation, tells Gia to address his mum as ma'am. That doesn't help much either. They finally arrive at the apartment, and the first round of the visit begins, the home inspection. Mitchell's mum slides her finger across a surface, inspecting it closely. She then calls for Gia, and Gia braces herself, thinking this is going to turn into one of those soap opera scenes with a nagging mother-in-law. To her surprise, Mitchell's mum reveals that she saw a soap opera where the mother-in-law nags the daughter-in-law, and she thought it'd be fun to try it out. Gia, feeling relieved but also a bit annoyed by the joke, chuckles awkwardly. Jizzy then says that Gia should clean more because there's a lot of dust, but quickly adds, "Just kidding." She turns to Mitchell, asking where she can unpack. Round 1 ends with a defeat for Gia, but she takes it in stride. Round 2 is lunch, where Mitchell's mum comments that the food is okay, though a bit too sweet for her taste. Gia quickly apologizes, explaining that her mum made the dish and that she should have tasted it beforehand. Next time, she'll ask her mum to make it less sweet. What Mitchell's mum actually meant, however, is that it needs more rice to balance it out. She rates it 4 out of 5 stars thanks to Gia's mum. Round 2 was a close save. Round 3 is the clean-up and tea. Everyone drinks tea, except Mitchell, who sticks to his protein shake. The conversation is awkwardly silent. Mitchell and his mum aren't talkative, and Gia is too nervous to speak up. Gia starts to worry that Mitchell's mum isn't convinced their marriage is legitimate and feels the pressure mounting. Desperate to change the mood, Gia realizes she needs to distract her with something. Gia looks at Mitchell and gets an idea. She asks him if he ever washes his shirt, thinking Mitchell's mum will immediately get suspicious because she heard Gia use his name. To her surprise, Mitchell's mum is curious instead and remarks how Mitchell always wears that same red shirt. The spotlight shifts to Mitchell, who sheepishly reveals his wardrobe, which consists exclusively of the same red shirt. Gia can't help but laugh as Mitchell's mum joins forces with her to fix his wardrobe. This day would go down in history as the first surprising of the Red Devils, inspired by the 2002 World Cup. Everyone was cheering for South Korea, and the Red Devil shirts were flying off the shelves. Gia and Mitchell were caught up in the excitement, but Mitchell took it a step further. He ordered the shirts in bulk, convinced it was a good deal. Now they find themselves at a clothing store, with Mitchell being dragged through the doors by both Gia and his mum. An employee asks how she can assist them, and they explain that they need help with Mitchell. They head to the men's section, and Gia soon realizes that even if she gets rid of all the red shirts, Mitchell still has an alarming collection of checkered shirts. Gia makes it her mission to make sure Mitchell doesn't buy more of those, but things take an unexpected turn. Suddenly, Mitchell's mum is enchanted by the vast collection of checkered shirts. Gia understands now why Mitchell has so many. Checkered shirts are his mum's signature style. Mitchell's mum insists that he try them on, but Mitchell resists. She then turns to Gia and asks what colour she prefers. Gia, though not particularly fond of either shirt, replies that both are fine. It dawns on Gia that Mitchell's wardrobe issues go beyond just comfort. She thought being an engineer was the main reason for his choice of clothes, but now she realises that his mum's preference for checkered patterns is also a factor. Under pressure from his mum, Mitchell reluctantly agrees to try on the shirts. Gia doesn't understand why Mitchell's mum likes checkered patterns so much. Maybe it's because she needs some sort of grid for when she scratches her back. Despite Gia's disinterest, the store employee seems genuinely excited about the idea of Mitchell getting a checkered shirt, likely because she thinks it will encourage a sale. Curious, the employee asks what Mitchell does for work. When he answers, she comments that the clothes suit him well, and even mentions the store's 3+3 event. Gia, however, isn't interested in the promotion. She picks out some clothes for Mitchell to try on. When he changes, the store employee is visibly impressed. Mitchell looks quite attractive. Gia's impressed too, but in a different way. She thinks this is just the bare minimum for Mitchell's wardrobe. It would be great if he dressed better, but right now, he looks drained. Suddenly, Mitchell's mum calls Gia daughter-in-law and comments that the outfits are too plain, suggesting he try the checkered shirts. The employee is stunned to hear that Gia is the daughter-in-law and quickly retreats behind the counter to take a phone call. Gia wonders why the employee isn't stepping in to help, but she suspects it's because the employee is trying to avoid any tension. Gia also thinks the employee might be interested in Mitchell and doesn't want to get involved now that she knows he's married. Mitchell's mum presses him, asking which option he prefers, but Mitchell masterfully avoids the question by claiming that all he cares about is comfort, and both options are comfortable. Gia acknowledges that avoiding an argument was the best move, and she thinks Mitchell has grown a little. However, she would have preferred it if he had taken her side. As they go to pay for the clothes, Mitchell whispers in Gia's ear that he actually liked the ones she chose better. Gia is shocked, and Mitchell quickly avoids her gaze. Gia feels a sense of relief, thinking that Mitchell said that to spare her feelings. But then she jokes that Mitchell won't get brownie points for complimenting her while she's pounding on his back. However, she quickly realizes that Mitchell's mum saw everything. Mitchell's mum looks embarrassed and turns away, scolding them for being in a public space. Her reaction gives Gia an idea. Gia tells Mitchell that they need to make his mum less suspicious of their marriage and reveals her plan. When they meet back up with Mitchell's mum, Gia and Mitchell are both wearing matching couple shirts. Mitchell's mum coughs in disbelief, and Gia justifies it by saying they were on sale. Gia came up with this idea after remembering that her parents always showed affection toward each other in public. Whenever they did, Mitchell's mum got embarrassed, so Gia figures she can't handle romance. The plan seems foolproof. If they flirt excessively in front of her, Mitchell's mum will stop being suspicious. Gia starts by calling Mitchell's name in a cute way and asking him to walk slower. Mitchell is confused but complies, turning into a rooster in the process. The plan works. Mitchell's mum is too embarrassed to say anything. Later, they're at a dessert cafe, and Gia tells Mitchell to say "ah" as she holds a spoonful of dessert toward him. Mitchell insists he can feed himself, but Gia ignores him and puts the spoon in his mouth anyway. The plan isn't perfect, though. Acting all lovey-dovey too quickly could raise suspicion, so it's a gamble. While feeding Mitchell, some dessert gets on his cheek, and Gia wipes it off with her finger before eating it. Gia isn't giving Mitchell's mum a break from her insanity, but she realizes that doing this alone won't be enough to clear the suspicions. She needs Mitchell to cooperate and asks him to help do something couple-like. Mitchell attempts to feed Gia and calls her a little birdie, which shocks both Gia and Mitchell's mum. They continue this act until they get home. Mitchell's mum acknowledges that they seem very close and suggests she should leave to avoid intruding, but Gia insists that she stay a few nights. Mitchell's mum, however, is firm about leaving, meaning Gia's operation was a huge success. Just then, it starts raining, so Mitchell's mum has no choice but to stay the night. In the same room as Mitchell, Gia suggests she sleep on the floor, but Mitchell says no and insists they sleep together since they're married. Gia is embarrassed, but as they're getting into bed, Mitchell's mum peeks through the door and sees them. She immediately assumes they're about to partake in spicy relations and says she'll be back in the morning. Gia quickly confirms it's not like that. 15 minutes earlier, Gia and Mitchell were in another room when Mitchell's mum asked why there was a bed in a room that wasn't Mitchell's. Gia gets nervous, knowing they actually sleep in separate beds, but before she can come up with an excuse, Mitchell steps in. He explains that he sleep talks and moves around a lot while sleeping, which made Gia uncomfortable, so he bought her a bed a few days ago so she could sleep well. Gia is impressed by Mitchell taking the initiative and giving such a sensible answer for once. She never would have thought the dense musclehead gamer, who only cares about not losing his gains, could be so sensible. Mitchell's mum seems somewhat convinced, until she points out that the bed looks well used, which seems like a contradiction. She then asks if they bought it second-hand. Gia and Mitchell are shocked as they return to the present. Gia is still worried that Mitchell's mum caught on to their scheme, despite them sharing a room. However, Mitchell's mum mentions she read something interesting recently and asks if they've heard of a show called Widow Couple. She says she'll send it to them later, wishes them good night, and leaves the room. Now, alone, Gia and Mitchell decide to sleep together for the first time. Mitchell suggests leaving now that his mum is gone, but Gia knows they must stay in the same bed to avoid suspicion. Mitchell proposes they sleep in opposite directions to maximize their space and comfort, but Gia doesn't like the idea. They settle on sleeping in the same direction, back to back. It's awkward, but it looks more like a real couple situation in case Mitchell's mum walks in. As they lay there, Gia can feel everything Mitchell does. His heartbeat, his breathing. Because of their position, it's embarrassing. Suddenly she notices Mitchell shaking with his hand in a weird position and asks if he's unwell. He assures her that he's not sick, but because of his jacked shoulders, his head doesn't align with the pillow when he sleeps on his side. He says it's fine though, as he'll get used to it. Then Mitchell apologizes for speaking up when his mum asked about the bed. To his surprise, Gia says he did well because her mind went blank during that situation. Gia is glad and tells Mitchell to lie down on his back to get comfortable. He's confused, but she then rests her head on his arm. By doing this, they both can be more comfortable and save space. Gia is now bored and decides to quiz Mitchell. She says she wants something from him and asks him to guess, all the while repeatedly touching his chest. Mitchell asks if he can take a guess, but Gia says no, offering him 3 points if he gets it right. Mitchell thinks he has it figured out and says, "You want a savings account with 1 billion won? Clean money, so you don't have to call Saul Goodman to launder it." The answer is tempting, but Gia says it's wrong. Mitchell is confused, so she gives him a hint. It's something he can give her right now. Mitchell guesses, "Is it chicken feet?" Gia shakes her head and he tries again, asking, "Menchoko?" Gia jokingly threatens to murder him. Frustrated, she says Mitchell is pretending to be stupid. Suddenly, Mitchell's arms wrap around Gia and she panics. He's now hugging her, and Gia is both embarrassed and shocked. She asks why he's doing this, and Mitchell responds, asking if this is what she wanted from the start. Gia, too embarrassed to answer, hesitates, and Mitchell keeps asking until she finally admits he's right and holds on to him. Mitchell is glad, But Gia is still unsure of what to make of the situation. She originally planned to tease him for fun, but his reaction was far different than she expected. Then Mitchell looks at Gia and gently touches her ear. Gia is shocked and doesn't know why he's doing this. She starts to get concerned that Mitchell might want to engage in something loud and spicy, and she doesn't know what to do, especially with Mitchell's mum just in the next room.